Awesome. Well, welcome everyone to our second learning burst in our gardening series. So we're welcoming Amanda back from Lee County, and I'm just going to hand it right over to you. We're so excited to follow up with you to see what's next.
Excellent. Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me. And quick shout out, Zaria is our new summer intern in Lee County. So she's joining us to see what we're on about here in Lee County. So can everyone see what I've got going on here on my screen? Oh, interesting.
Yes, we can see a flyer, I guess you'd call it.
Excellent, good. Yes, because this is a shameless plug for stuff going on in Lee County. Actually, this is a statewide program, y'all. There is a webinar on June 7th to learn how to participate in the Great Southeast Pollinator Census. It is a citizen science project that was started in Georgia by UGA Extension, and it has now come to North Carolina. But the census is really, it is a very simple activity, and could be done with your fours. It could also be done with your after school kids. The timing of it is the dates of the census are August 18th and 19th, but the webinar is June 7th. And it is a very simple program, but it would be great for folks to join us and learn how they can participate. You get to learn about pollinators, you get to see pretty flowers, and you get to learn about how we can contribute to science together. And let's see if I can get oh, look at that. So this is installment 2 of our presentation of Let's Be Real. Originally it was about raised bed gardening, but I really wanted to step back and make sure that everyone had realistic expectations for starting a garden. And so class 2 today, what we're going to be learning about is what do you need for your garden and how are you going to pay for it. We're going to talk about materials and funding and a couple of resources. I'm hoping that I'm going to stay on topic. I feel like this one, so somebody please keep an eye on the time for me. I could go on for days about this, because we're going to really talk about soil, and we're really going to talk about what your beds or what your garden is made out of, because that is the most important part. And it's also where a lot of money goes, especially if you're getting started. So like everybody said, my name is Amanda Wilkins. I'm the horticulture agent here in Lee County. I work for NC Cooperative Extension, which is a program that provides non-formal education to the public from NC State University, NC A&T, as well as national networks and lots of research institutions. Our job is to provide research-based information to essentially better your lives. So we have a good time. And this presentation, as many presentations in extension, are really couldn't happen without our colleagues. There's many folks who are out there creating content for extension agents to extend their education capabilities across the state. We love it when we don't have to recreate the wheel. So all these wonderful folks have helped pull this presentation together in various pieces and bits. So remember last week we were talking about thinking about why you want to garden and how you need to be thinking about making steps towards whether a garden is appropriate for you, and if it is, things to think about before you go out there and you start buying a bunch of plants and raised bed gardens, because really what we want is success. So this week is about what do you need? So some of you guys think of these things. We're gonna see. Some of these things are important, but there's a lot of other things that are important. And when you start a garden, it's another review. I've used this in all of my presentations. if you hear my presentations, you're going to hear this over and over, but you're going to be able to recite it. A gardener's job is to help plants reach their full genetic potential by taking in, analyzing, and managing the biotic, the living things, and the abiotic factors, the non-living things in their garden. And then having fun. Gardening is fun. Or at least it can be at a certain point. Sometimes it's just a chore, but generally it's a lot of fun. So this week we're going to talk about what the plants need. Last week we talked about kind of what you need to start. This is the week about what the plants actually need. So here's our complicated plant with all of its roots, stems, and leaves labeled, so you can kind of appreciate the complexity of this organism and all of the organisms that you're going to grow in your garden. And these are all the things that they need. They need light. Whether it's from a grow light, or it's from the sun, or it's from the sun being impacted by the shade of the trees. They need air, air kind of in the form of wind, but also the weather and the climate, which comes in with the water sometimes. Like, I was very fortunate last night in Sanford, we got more than ½ an inch of rain, which we really needed. But water, and otherwise you have to haul it in from somewhere else. Nutrients, which are generally being scavenged from the soil or the media by your plants. And then in actuality, plants need friends. They need pollinators if you want to make fruit. And then they also need other animals, because sometimes there are animals like insects or rodents or other things that that protect plants. So plants need friends. We talked last week about site considerations. A lot of the things that plants need, the light, the air, the water, these are all things that you need to be considering when you're assessing your site. And that's what we talked about last week. Did somebody have a comment?
I'm sorry.
That's okay. Why don't you go ahead and mute yourself? That way.
Yeah, I'm getting coming in, great kids and stuff. Sorry.
No worries. So the site considerations we talked about last week, and if you don't remember those things, I know the recording is going to go out, so I'll leave that there. But the rest of it, the soil and how everything pulls together, is horticulture. And this is the art, science, and practice of garden cultivation and management. And if you build a garden, or even if you're just growing a plant, you are a garden, and you're a gardener, and you're practicing horticulture. This is one of our master gardeners, and this was her haul after digging up a bunch of plants from our pollinator garden in Lee County. And honestly, if you looked at it today, it doesn't even look like she did anything last year. So we talked about those abiotic factors. And I really like to reiterate these because in my slide, I say soil. So abiotic factors are the non-living elements found within an ecosystem. So this is the space between your plants, the space around your plants, the space between your plants and something else, and where they're oriented in the universe. The climate is the air and the water and the temperature and the weather that goes into what's happening at your site, and what that weather is like through time. And for those of y'all who have lived in North Carolina for a long time, for us, we had a very cool, mild, long spring. It's only been getting warm in the last couple of weeks, whereas I know I can remember many, many years, one after the other, where it felt like summer started in March. Where, you deal with it. You can, and then the soil. And soil is where we're going to spend a lot of time on today, because it will make or break the success of your garden, whatever you choose to grow it in. So we've got two different kind of growing situations here. We've got a raised bed garden coming together from Sanford Child Care, or from Stepping Stones Child Care here in Lee County. And then we've got this agricultural field. And there's a difference between these two things. Yes, plants are going to be growing in both of these locations, but the difference is what the plants are growing in. In the bed on the left, we have totally brought in all of the material here. We had to bring in the compost and the potting media and the sand and everything that goes in this bed. It's almost 2 yards of material. That's a lot of material. Whereas the soil in this agricultural field is here. You know, we didn't have to bring anything in. Sometimes they do spread chicken manure out here, but that's really, you know, I didn't have to haul in a bunch of material to make this soil here. And people get really hung up on gardening in containers and raised beds. For one thing, it can be very visually impactful. You know, it's like, bam, it's this thing and you're filling it and it looks, it's, you know, very dynamic and you can kind of customize it. But there's other reasons to grow in containers or raised beds. So if you've got a small space, it's a great way to kind of contain the garden in one spot. Flexibility and accessibility. So you can, especially for young children, they are not as adept at moving through space. And so sometimes they have a tendency to trip over things or walk through things. And so if you've got a tall raised bed or a tall container, they're less likely to trip over it or walk through the plants. And then you can also avoid soil problems, which I feel like here, sometimes gardeners will, they've either got too much clay or too much sand or too much of this or not enough of this, and they get really hung up on that. And a lot of times they don't need to. There's things to do, but there are times when there are soil-borne diseases that you have to just grow in, brought in media to grow what you want. Containers and raised beds also, you have a lot of control over what your plants are growing in, for better or for worse. Sometimes you have to remember that you're in control because you are creating a place where your plants are growing. And if you're not on top of it, it can become less efficient. There's also times such as situations like this. This is a local construction site here in Lee County, and construction soils or post new build soils are very poor. Most of the time, the topsoil has been scraped away, and that's where a lot of the organic matter and nutrients that are readily available to your plants are at. And so if it's scraped away, you have nothing for your plants to eat or to get nutrients from. So in a case like this, you could create an in-ground bed, but it would take a couple of years to kind of get the soil to the point where you would be able to grow something good that you would be excited about. But with raised beds and container gardens, it's still maintenance. Just because you can open a box and build a garden bed and voila, it's all there and it's contained, you still have to maintain it. Weeds will show up. I wish I forgot to put that picture. Weeds will still show up. You will have to water it more frequently because water moves differently in a container than it does in the ground. And we'll talk a little bit about that. When you have to water more, you will have to fertilize more because you're going to be rinsing those fertilizers out of your media that you're growing in possibly before your plants are able to get them. And the upfront cost of putting in container gardens is quite high. So we put in 2 raised bed gardens at each of our daycare sites in Lee County, and it was just at $500 with all of the other stuff that we bought. If we didn't have compost donated to the project, it probably would be closer to $750. Now, do you guys have to go, oh my gosh, I need $750 to start a raised bed garden? No. There are ways to scale it up. But yes, and never go out into your garden or into a spot in your center or at your house and use native soil from your property. Mineral soil, the stuff that's in the ground, when you dig that up and you put it into a container or a raised bed, it does not have the same physical properties as it does in the ground. So that's why you usually see like pine bark chips and peat moss and other kind of organic stuff used in potting media. It's because that is what plants need in the physics of that container. So just don't put native soil in your garden bed, in your raised beds. Also, you want to make sure that you are using a tall enough raised bed kit, if that's what you choose to use. You really don't want anything less than 10 inches. When you use something that's shorter than 10 inches, what can happen is you have a lot more contact with the native soil that's below where you're putting that kit. And what will happen is if you put nice, beautiful soil in that shallow bed or that shallow kit, what happens is the roots will grow into that nice soil, but they won't get into the native soil. And then you have created this pan of roots. And your plants might look good for a while, but eventually what will happen is if we go through a drought or a really hot, stressful time, your plants will not have the root systems that they will need to support themselves if you forget to water them 1 or 2 days. So you can just kind of save yourself some trouble. If you choose to use something really short, now this raised, I'm not in any way endorsing Miracle-Gro. This is purely for an example of how to read different kits. This is a 48 inch, so 4 feet by 4 foot by 5.5 inch tall kit. So you have 5.5 inches of essentially edging to put around a garden bed. What will happen is you will only have that 5.5 inches of good soil or good media that you bring in that your plants can grow in. Now, that's not to say that you can't get this and use some compost to amend the native soil, which we'll talk about in a second, but it's just not going to be, if you don't do the incorporation, you can run into issues. So this is what I mean by in-ground bed. So these are on the ground using native soil. This is my vegetable garden back in January. What I did is I took compost from the city nearby and incorporated it into the native soil. And then I brought a few more inches of that compost in and tilled that into what I'd created with the first step and kind of created these mounds of soil. And it has worked really well. This is a community garden in Western Lee County where they have been growing in these raised beds. You can see that they, the boxes are about 6 inches tall. But what they do every year is they get a load of compost from the local compost facility. You can see it in the back near the church there, that dark pile. It smelled like cow the day I went out. It is a cow manure based compost, but they mulch and till in a few inches of this compost every year to their raised beds, and they get it into the native soil. And through time, that has created a really nice growing soil for their plants. So why am I so fixated on the soil? Because plants live in it. That's where they live. Remember, plants don't get up and move. If they don't like where they're at, they're not like us. They can't, go sit in an air-conditioned room. They can't, go leave and find a place they like to be. They have to live where you put them, and where they live is in the soil or the media, the substrate that they're living in. And the way that works is their roots grow into this media, and the roots are looking for water and nutrients dissolved in water to absorb through their tissues to send up to the rest of the plant. They are not absorbing big clods of fertilizer. You know, you see those little fertilizer pellets. They're not going, oh, I'm going to like swallow that and bring it into my tissues. That's not what they do. So there's a lot of stuff going on. And when roots are healthy and the soil has the right amount of moisture, they're going to be working their best. What's really happening underground is this very complex give and take of sugars and water and nutrients and chemicals. And plants have very specific, or have very a wide variety of relationships with bacteria and fungi that just are occurring naturally in the soil and the media that you're using. There are bacteria and fungi and other microorganisms floating around in the air all the time. They live on every surface, not to freak everybody out. A lot of them are fine. There's only a few of them that are bad, I promise. But it's the good ones that work with and help plants have healthier root connections and help them find more resources in the soil. So when you're growing plants in soil or you're growing plants in a raised bed garden or container, remember that there's other things living in that soil and that media with your plants that you want to take care of, because they are, a lot of times, those bacteria and fungi are much more efficient at finding water and nutrients than your plants are. And the soil is not just alive with tiny things. There's also bigger animals. Everybody gets really excited when they see their earthworms floating around. Everybody knows that when you have earthworms, you have healthy soil. And when you have earthworms, you're going to have other insects, you're going to have birds, you're going to have moles and voles and mice and ants and all those things. Even though some of those things scare people, it's all of those things working together, going about their lives, that provide this place for healthy plants to be healthy. So now that we know the soil is alive, why do we not use soil in our containers and our raised beds? Because they do not, the physics changes, the actual way that the air and the water and the different particles of the soil fit together, it changes. You can think of soil, like stuff in the ground, like a Lincoln log structure. You know, it's stuck together, there's little pieces that fit together and you can like build something really amazing. But if you've ever tried to lift up a Lincoln Logs structure and maybe just dump it into a bin, it's going to fall apart. And you're not going to suddenly just shake it and it's going to shake back into the beautiful structure that you had before. The same thing happens with soil. When you dig it up and you put it in a container, you've shaken those Lincoln Logs and they fall apart, and it takes time for them to kind of create something that looks more like a structure. And it's those structures that allow for air and water to get down into the soil. And so that's why we're always going on about using soilless substrates or media rather than soil. And here there's some pictures. So you can also tell if you've got good growing media. The picture on the left is healthy roots. They're nice and white and bright, and the little fine root hairs look like little fuzz. Whereas on the right, you can see that the roots are dark brown and the leaves look really wilty, and it looks like a very sad plant. And that's because there's not a lot of oxygen in that soil. Roots breathe. So there's not a lot of oxygen for those roots to breathe, and they're drowning and they're dying, and it causes root rot problems. So we're talking about media, and we really want to make sure we're getting off to a good start. And different medias are made of different things, but here's the building blocks. You want a mixture of large particles, because large particles help with water drainage, and then they help roots be able to find places to get between and to the smaller stuff. You want some small particles and organic matter, because those things hold water. Water is sticky, and water likes to stick to little things. So that can help with the water holding capacity, which also helps with the nutrient holding capacity, because nutrients love to be absorbed in water. And then there's some other things that get added to media that make it lightweight. You really want to make sure you're getting it from a reputable place. So that way it is free of pests, pathogens, and weeds. There is such thing as potting media contamination. You want to really trust where you're getting it from, and it's a good quality product. Nothing's worse than dumping out a bag of media and you get a bunch of weeds in a couple of weeks. It's just really frustrating. And then some medias come with nutrients. Some of them don't. Make sure you're reading the bag, and we'll talk about that in a second. So these are some different components that you might see. Aged pine bark, which looks like they look like little pieces of mulch. Peat moss, coconut coir, that's the really bougie stuff that sometimes you might see on YouTube University. Compost, which could be from a lot of different things. Could be from manure, it could be from kitchen scraps, it could be from a lot of different things. Perlite, which are this picture here, these little white rocks that you can crush and make into little dust. They are essentially a volcanic pumice type material. They're great for filling the space and providing places for air and water to kind of hang around, and it also makes the material lighter. Vermiculite is different than perlite. Vermiculite is a mica product, and it is great for holding moisture, and especially if you're starting your own seeds. Vermiculite is what's going to be in that media that you buy, that seed starting media, because it holds so much water, but it is not necessarily good once your plants get older and have larger roots. Most plants that you're going to be growing, especially in a vegetable garden setting, don't need vermiculite as they have gotten to the production size. Parboiled rice hulls, I hear about these a lot because it is an industrial byproduct. And some YouTubers have kind of gone on about them. It is a good filler in some cases, and some potting media companies are incorporating them in to their media. Is it the silver bullet that's going to make your potting media amazing? No, it's just another source of organic matter. I've seen parboiled rice hulls used actually in a more effective way as a kind of a sprinkling over your seed starting trays if you have a moss problem, if you're starting in a greenhouse somewhere. And then coarse sand, and this just means this is usually play sand or construction sand that's screened. Play sand is the brand, but you want to make sure it's screened. You want to make sure that it is a coarser material. You don't want fine beach sand. And even though you're like, Amanda, sand is I have sand in my backyard. Why can't I use that sand? Because you're using such a small amount. It's really a small amount compared to everything. So here's a handful of media with all the different components labeled. So we've got some slow release fertilizer. Usually the little balls are slow release fertilizer. We've got peat moss and some bark in there. But everything is different, unfortunately. This is my kind of recipe for a general media, especially if you're growing in a large raised bed, because you want to have some large and medium-sized particles to provide that structure that you have to create. But you still want the small particles, and you want the compost and the composted materials to provide some organic matter and small particles and nutrients kind of to get you started. And the sand and the sandy loam, we've used sandy loam because there is a product here in North Carolina that's sold by a common potting soil company, and I usually do, it is a 3:1:2 ratio on this page, just enough sand to kind of like be able to mix everything together. Oop. So commercial media, there's so much out there. Really, if you're not sure about which one's best for your spot, you should contact your local cooperative extension office and they can give you some great recommendations. Most commonly, especially with those who shall not be named in this picture, there's a lot of them that have a combination of peat moss and perlite, maybe with some pine bark fines, but there are a lot out there that have peat moss and perlite. I'm not anti peat moss, but I will say that peat moss holds a lot of water, and it's good in small amounts, but in a smaller kind of pot container, but in a large raised bed, you're going to waste a lot of money on it, and it's not going to provide the structure that you need in large amounts. Remember to look for mix or media in the name, and do not put topsoil in your garden bed. Topsoil is still a mineral soil. It does not have a legal definition, so it could be made of anything. It could have come from anywhere, and you don't want any unknowns in this brand new baby bed that you're about to introduce to your center. Some of them may contain fertilizers, or say like 6 months of feeding or whatever. Most of the time it is not enough. It's going to give you probably maybe 3 to 4 weeks of feeding, but you are going to have to amend with fertilizer after a certain amount, especially with how much rain we get in North Carolina and how warm and wet it is. That heat and that humidity and that water just makes just uses up nutrients in the system much faster. So I went to Home Depot a couple of years ago and bought all of the different brands that they had, just to compare and contrast them. And at the time I was living near Home Depot. Everybody, depending on the community that you're in, different big box stores are going to carry different brands. They are going to, a lot of times they're going to be regionally sourcing them, and they have a person at a regional center dictating what they're carrying. Some of it may be local to North Carolina. Sometimes it may be from Virginia or Georgia. But be discerning and don't be afraid to ask. Remember, this is what you're buying is for your gardens. So I've got timberline, mushroom compost, and mushroom compost. It's got to be good. And then I've got potting mix. So, okay, it's got mix in it. That's the key word there. And then I've got garden soil. Okay, so I've got mix and garden soil. That sounds good. And I've got a raised bed mix there on the side. So, hey, if I'm making a raised bed, that's got to be good, right? But always turn that bag over. Remember, these people are trying to sell you something. So they're going to put their best foot forward. They're going to try and sell you on the front of that bag. But legally, if they are selling you a potting media or if they're selling you fertilizer, there are certain things that have to be on the label, on the bag to make it, to tell you what's inside of it. And just like you're reading a nutrition label, you can read the nutrition label of your fertilizer. So I opened all of those bags and this is what I got. Can anyone tell the difference? Can anyone tell me which one was the raised bed garden and which one was the potting soil and which one was the potting mix? I can't even remember. I think I could probably cheat with some of the bags, but what I'm trying to illustrate here is there's a lot of diversity. And it can be confusing. And sometimes buying media in a bag is a little bit of an experiment in and of itself. Some people have their secret sauce that they've put together, and some people have just learned by trial and error. and don't be afraid to try. And if you're not sure, you know, if you've got a couple of extra, if you can buy a couple of different types of bags, feel free to buy all of them, and you can ask your local cooperative extension agent or extension master gardeners, and they will come out and look at it with you and help you kind of formulate which one is best. There are some that are just only good for mulch, especially if they have too much pine bark and not enough of the other stuff. Or you can mix them together. I think what I ended up doing is I ended up mixing a few of them together to make some potting media for some containers, and then some other stuff I put in and actually created a new garden bed in my garden. But I was looking at those different particle sizes and trying to mix and match them for the purpose I was using them for. If you're doing raised beds, you are going to have settling. It's that Lincoln Logs problem again. You know, when you've taken something out of one shape and you've put it into something else, you've shaken those Lincoln Logs and they've fallen apart. And eventually what will happen is the water and the air will get kind of come out of that and get kind of smushed through time. And you will have to add more media to your raised beds through time. You can do that by buying more of the media or by adding compost a little bit every year. You can make sure you can get in there and kind of work it into the soil, so you're working air back into it, but you are going to have settling. So don't think that this is something that you can kind of build and walk away from. It may be 1 year that you have to add it. It may be 3 years, but you will have to. A little bit of something about compost. We're very fortunate here in the Triangle that we have 2 major composting facilities. There is a composting facility in most regions, and there's a North Carolina composting council where you can look up if you have a local composting facility nearby. The prices are generally very reasonable. And we have had our local folks donate a couple of yards here and a couple of yards there towards our farm to ECE projects, because there's 1 yard to them when they have 600 yards of material is very minimal. And you're not having to move that product very far. If you choose to compost at your facility, that's great. And there are resources to help you evaluate what is appropriate for your center and how you can kind of think how you should have that in your gardening area. And if you'd like to learn more about that, please contact your local cooperative extension office and they can point you in the direction of that. It is, especially if you have if you do cook on site at your center, it's a great way to divert some of that food waste and turn it back into something that you're going to put back into your garden beds. And it's a very simple recipe. It's browns plus greens. So things that are brown and things that are green, air, water, and time. Because what you're doing is you're just creating an ecosystem where fungi and bacteria are eating all that stuff and making it into something else. And if you don't, and you can incorporate it as a mulch as well. A thing about organic matter, and this also, organic matter can be anything, but a lot of times for people, this means compost. You should not build any bed, whether it's on the ground or in a raised bed kit, strictly out of compost, because you're not going to get those large particles and the right mixture of large and small particles. You're not going to get the structure that you'd have if you had some of those pine bark fines. But also in a mineral soil situation, you can actually overload that bed with too much nutrients, with too much material. And what will happen is it will put the pH out of balance, which actually will take the nutrients away from your plants, even though the nutrients are there. When the pH is out of balance, your plants can't access those nutrients. So it is better to, when you're making a new garden bed in the ground, only do about 25% of the total kind of volume of the garden bed with compost, and then only apply 1 to 3 inches of organic matter or the compost every year. You don't have to put in big, huge chunks of it. A little goes a long way. Do not, I repeat, do not, if you have clay, for those of y'all who are blessed with clay is a blessing, use a compost, either like some sort of manure-based compost or from your local composting facility. Do not, I repeat, do not add peat moss, add sand, hardwood bark chips, wood chips, or pine straw in clay soils. There's a lot of misinformation on the internet, and these are the heavy hitters. Adding peat moss to clay does not break the clay up. It creates this really nasty material. The same with sand. You kind of create this really awful brick. Hardwood bark and wood chips are not broken down. So what will happen is you create a situation where fungi will grow and they will suck the water and they will suck the nutrients out of the soil so they can eat, and they will take it away from your plants. So a little bit of a crazy time there. Plant nutrients, these are the things that your plants need to stay alive. I don't want to say that they're food, because the plants don't digest these things and make stuff out of them. But they help the plant make food, because remember, plants are using light to create food. The main 3 things that you need to worry about in most cases are the N and the P and the K. And this is your chemistry for the day. This is the nitrogen, the phosphorus, and the potassium. Because these are the main things that when you look at that nutrition label, that guaranteed analysis on your fertilizer bag, because you're going to need fertilizer, that's what you're looking for. And even here on this lawn soil, there was even a little guaranteed analysis on the back. 0.8, 0.3, 0.2 is not very much. There's 2 different types of fertilizers. There's synthetic fertilizers and natural fertilizers. There's no real, like, one is better than the other. It's all a choice, and it's all based on what your your personal choices are in your gardening. The thing with natural fertilizers is that it takes time for them to break down even after you've applied them. So your plants are going to be a little delayed getting their nutrition. Is that a bad thing? No. But I will say natural fertilizers, people are less likely to burn their plants. Some people think more is better. In the case of fertilizers, it is not. But don't overthink it. And if you are growing in the ground, in the native soil, you need to do a soil test before you purchase anything. Don't put anything on your soil until you've done a soil test first. And don't get tricked into grabbing the prettiest label. If it has the thing you're talking about, you're like, I want to grow roses, so I should buy rose tone. That is not necessarily true. You need to have done a soil test. And make sure you're reading the label and you're understanding that guaranteed analysis, that NPK value. Sometimes the marketers get a hold of these packages and they'll go, we will get somebody to buy something for their roses and their hollies and their gardens and their plants. And we're going to get some garden food, and I'll buy all of these things and it'll be good for all of the plants in my garden. And you probably could have just bought one product and put it in your garden everywhere. And here's some fertilizer we put out. We use Plant Tone. This is a very common organic fertilizer made from processed chicken manure and other chicken parts. It does smell to high heaven, but it is very, it's an effective and commonly used organic fertilizer. And you can see we kind of sprinkled it around the plants, not on the plants, and not even directly next to the plants. We applied this over the surface of the soil and watered it in. It's best to apply fertilizer around a plant rather than in the whole of the plant that you're planting. You're less likely to burn the roots of the plants that way. And eventually the fertilizer will work its way through the soil or through the media if you are, as it rains and as you water. And why soil test? It really saves you money. If you don't have to go out and buy a bag of fertilizer, you've saved money. If the soil is already giving your plants what they need, you're good to go. But if you're not growing in soil, if you're growing in raised beds and you brought in all that media and the pine bark fines and the cow manure and blah, 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 you have to do a different soil test. You're going to do what's called a soilless media analysis. And you're going to go to your North Carolina Cooperative Extension Office and you're going to say, this lady on a webinar told me that I need to get my media sampled. She said I needed a soilless media analysis, and they can help you, because this is going to tell you what you need in your raised beds. The soil test report is for mineral soil only. If you put your raised bed mix in there that's got a lot of compost and organic matter, you're not going to get an accurate reading from that soil test. And then you could be wasting time not putting down something that your plants need. You should always mulch your gardens, whatever gardens that you have. North Carolina, our summers are brutal, and mulch helps so many different things, including soil moisture retention, so keeping moisture in the soil and stopping it from evaporating, especially when we go through these hot, dry periods. It builds soil because as it breaks down, it becomes organic matter and compost-like stuff, which our microbes and our plants love. It also suppresses weeds. A lot of our common weeds require light to germinate. So when you put mulch on top of the soil or the media, you're stopping any weed seeds from seeing the light of day. You can get mulch from wherever you can get it. There is no mulch that is better than another. And you can use compost as mulch as well, which is what we do in our gardens here. Where can you get kits from? You can get them from your local hardware stores, national chains, internet marketplaces. You can make your own. Just make sure you're not using pressure treated wood. I thought this was really cool. These were some really interesting blocks that this lady found at a local big box store, and she just had some wooden planks that she locked into them. If you can only find pressure treated wood, you can line the beds with landscape fabric and provide some level of protection, but yeah, they're around. These were the metal kits that we got. They were priced various and sundry, they had different price levels. And this is our garden. This was our beds. I showed this in the last slide. Whenever I was calculating, I said, hey, we're going to do raised beds. I don't want to do in-ground beds. I budgeted, I think each of these kits was about $75 to $125. Next, I had to order the media to go in it. So I had to calculate the volume. And for those of y'all who have afternoon kids who may need to do their, to practice their math, you can kind of estimate your volumes. And so we measured our beds and figured out that this is how many cubic feet of volume per bed there was. We named our beds. They're called Ironside, G.I. Joe, and Retro Diner. You gotta have some fun with it. But just as a reference, so this is in cubic feet. So, 1 by 1 by 1. So they're, and in a yard of material, there are 27 cubic feet, which a lot of places are going to sell their bags of media either in cubic foot bags, or they're going to sell them in yards. So knowing how many cubic feet you have in your whatever kit you decide to use can help you figure out how many bags of media you need to buy. Also, you need to think about the longevity of the project. Are you in a stable place? Is this something that you really want to invest in time in, or are you just giving it a try? Just make sure you're buying high quality materials, because you could end up spending a lot of money on not a lot of something. Now, I'm not saying going out and doing what the crazy Mobile herb gardeners did and build it out of bricks, but just think about the longevity. If you choose to use containers like pots, make sure that they can both hold the media that you have, but also can drain water. You need to add drain holes to everything, and check your pots before you put soil or before you put media in them. Make sure you've checked for the drainage. All pots need to drain. Unless you're growing a water garden, your pots need to drain that water away. You will end up with root rot problems, which will hinder the amount of vegetables and fruits you're going to get from your plants. You also consider what the material is made out of. Black pots are great because they're cheap, but if you are growing in full blazing sun, they are going to be very hot, which means your plant's roots are going to be hot. If they're top heavy, if they're easily blown over, you just need to make sure that you are thinking through what you're going to be doing with those pots in your space. There's a lot of options out there. Don't try to cram too many plants in these pots. A tomato in a commercial production needs about 4 cubic feet of soil to grow in. So 4 cubic feet per plant. So just think about that when you're trying to put plants into your pots. Again, if you have a shallow container, though, you can grow shallow rooted vegetable crops like lettuce. If you have a really deep one, you can grow root crops like carrots and parsnips. If you have a larger container, though, you're going to have better moisture retention. So if you are like me, and some days I just don't haul the hose around the yard, if you have a larger container, it's going to be able to tolerate not getting watered every day. And not all crops are appropriate for the kit that you may have chosen. So this was at a local daycare, and they had wanted to try growing sweet potatoes, and they had put it in this little boxed bed, and really there was only about 6 inches of soil that this plant had to grow in. And so when sweet potatoes don't have a lot of space, they don't make big sweet potatoes, they make a lot of runner roots. So they had these beautiful sweet potato vines, but when they went to harvest the potatoes, there was nothing there. Oh man, here's one of my pet peeves, and we're almost done, guys, so hang in there with me. Do not put gravel or anything in the bottom of your pots to improve drainage. It does not improve drainage. It actually does, it creates a perched water table. It is better for plant roots and for you if you fill the entire container with a uniform media. The best way to describe this, there's all sorts of fun physics and chemistry words I can use, but the best way to describe this is whenever you put media in a pot, it turns into a sponge. And if you've been washing dishes and you're washing dishes and you put the sponge on the side of the sink and you put it where it's laying like this, it doesn't really drain out. You know, it still stays wet. And then maybe you might have a little bit of a puddle underneath it, but it's still going to be kind of wet. But if you put it in the drainer on the side of the sink, you'll see all the water run out. It's the same way with pots. Water sticks to those particles in a way that it's just easier to explain it like a sponge. And if you have animal problems, just be mindful of that. Nothing's worse than having a beautiful crop of vegetables and fruits, and you come in the next day and a deer has mowed it down. It's a lesson, you know, all these gardens that we're doing for our children are all teaching lessons, but it's still a bummer. So materials, this is our local composting facility. We were very fortunate to have access to a trailer. And for those of y'all who are installing new beds, see if some of the families or a local landscaper would be willing to bring the materials to the center for you. A lot of times they will count it as volunteer hours. It is really convenient, especially if you're doing large kits, to have a trailer. And what we did is we just scooped it up, and the front end loader dropped it into all these pots, and we carried the pots into place. Don't do it alone. Just don't do it alone. A garden should never be a one-man band show. Especially at a daycare, you want to, one of the best lessons of a garden is that it should be shared. And the same is with you and your maintenance in your building. So this was us. We had, so we got our raised bed kits. We had our soil staged nearby, and Meredith's kind of shoring in the edges of this kit. You can see there's a little brace bar to keep the kit together. It was a very large, like I said, it was like 1.7 yards, which is a lot of soil, a lot of media. And it was a perfect height though, because the kids have gone back in to see this since this photo was taken, and the children love to pick up fistfuls of the media and throw it at each other. So we've lost a little bit of material since then. But on installation day, so we've got the material for the beds. But you can see on the left-hand side, I added some compost to these already existing beds. And so you can see I've kind of I put the compost on top, and then I've kind of mixed it in with the soil that was there before. The soil that was here was very sandy, which was okay, but it had started to compact and become very hard. So by actually like digging up the soil and flipping it and putting that compost into it, I've added air into the system and kind of reshuffled the structure a little bit. So turning in compost is a great way to refresh old raised beds and even just old garden areas. Compost is really the way to go. So in summary, the cost. So our kits were anywhere between $45 and $150, depends on where you're getting it from and how big it is. The media kind of came out to about $5 per cubic foot. So again, doing that volume calculation is really important, because you can kind of anticipate the cost per cubic foot. Watering materials, so that's considering if you're buying a hose or a timer or anything, any kind of hose head. You need to make sure that if you don't have a hose, you want one. Plant materials and seeds in all actuality are probably the cheapest part of putting in a garden, especially if you're growing things from seeds, and then fertilizer. And depending on how big your beds are, this was for our couple of kits here. You can buy fertilizer in a 36 to 50 pound bag, and those bags a lot of times can last you a year or two, depending on the size of your garden beds. I know I've been going on along. This is actually the fastest part of my presentation, because I want you guys to kind of get a sense of how you may not have to pay for this. So where's the money? Look for local partnerships within your community. People love supporting children. If you start building relationships with people and you start to tell them that you have garden plans for your children, people love that, and they will want to contribute to that, especially if they have a positive relationship with you. Fundraisers. Fundraisers are a way to do that. And I've got a list of some ideas that were actually really good. Grants are a common source of funds. And I know that being here is kind of a training bonus for a lot of y'all. And there are there are curriculum programs that if you participate and put your children through these training programs, you can get access to funds. That's how we paid for all of our raised beds, is our daycare teachers participated in Color Me Healthy. And then contact your local cooperative extension office. A lot of times, extension is kind of interesting. Sometimes we have a lot of stuff that comes across our desk. And if we know that you have a project, or if you have dreams of having a garden or having a specific type of garden, if we know that you want that and we see something that's relevant, we can let you know. So we can be kind of your eyes and ears for opportunities if we are familiar with who you are and have an understanding of what your vision is, because you need to have a vision and you need to have a plan. Gardens are work. Gardens take time and effort. And if it's going to be too much time and effort, it's okay that this is not the teaching tool for you. But be reasonable. That's my whole last presentation. You can go back and watch that one. Quick shout out to Sanford Childcare, looking good. The picture on the right is round 2. This is their vegetables from this year. Super proud of them. So I think this presentation is being recorded, but I can also provide a PDF version where you can get these hyperlinks. Life Lab, I've got a few slides from them. They have some great school garden grant search resources. And here's a few here. These are just some really common, and this was based in California, but a lot of these are national organizations. So they also had some great fundraiser ideas. And healthy fundraisers, a little bit of a shout out. Remember, Farm to ECE is about healthy eating as well. And while I do miss being able to eat a Krispy Kreme donut, maybe a Krispy Kreme donut for a fundraiser is not a great thing to raise funds for your garden bed. But yeah, some different ideas. And then finding supplies. Just to shout, I love the reminder that Craigslist is out there, and there's lots of different university or corporate surplus stores in North Carolina. You can Google state of North Carolina surplus. There is an online auction website. They have weird stuff going across that website all the time, and a lot of times it's really cheap. And it's very random, so it's kind of fun to like peruse it every now and then. Also a great source for toys, which might sound a little weird. Farm Bureau, North Carolina, they do a lot of teacher grants and student grants, and they also have at the national level, they give out a lot of books, because reading and books are some of their project areas. They also have some great lesson plans for a lot of different ages. So for those of y'all who have after school programs, there's some stuff for you as well. This is the Teaching Gardens Network that was created by the Heart Attack and Stroke, or the American Heart Association. This is a way for them to keep track of your garden, but if you sign up for this service, you'll get kind of heart healthy ways and healthy ways of using your garden. And it's a way to be made aware of grants that they make available to teaching gardens. This is not necessarily a specific grant source, but the North Carolina Farm to Preschool Network and the North Carolina Farm to School Coalition, those two organizations are where I get most of my grant ideas from. The folks at those two organizations, they may even come together soon. I don't know what they're going to decide to do, but their monthly and weekly newsletters are chock full of awesome resources that and there's a little bit of everything for everyone, but they are way more than I have time for to pull together myself. So I'm always trying to tell folks to look at them, because they're pretty much everything anyone would not want to know about. The website Gardening Know-How also has a garden sponsorship program, and those garden sponsorships can be $5,000 and $10,000. And they do this every year, and $5,000 will get you everything you'd ever want ever for a garden, especially if you're only doing it on a small scale for a daycare garden. So $5,000 is a lot of money. This is not quite a shout out to the Secure Rural Schools program, though it could be. This is more of a reminder that if you are working together with your local partners, especially if you continue a relationship with SEFs and Farm to ECE and your local cooperative extension office and your local partnership, as you guys build that relationship, you start to get the potential for accessing bigger lots of money at a higher level. Like the U.S. Department of Agriculture had a rash of really amazing grants recently, but they require that you have a good, strong working relationship in your local community, and you have a clear vision for what you're going to be using the funds for. So don't just think of today or tomorrow, think about what could this look like on a community scale, because there could be money to support that community scale change. Kidsgardening.org is probably the best one for grants out there. There are a lot of corporations that partner with Kids Gardening to sponsor grants. There's one grant that they've got going right now about converting abandoned city lots into community gardens. So if there's anybody out there who knows that there's an abandoned lot near their school, they're giving $20,000, I think, to convert it. But they have grants coming in and out of their cycle all the time. And they also do contests that are usually activity-based, that if you do them in your schools and you participate, you can get access to funds. Some quick resources. Quick shout out to Dr. Lucy Bradley. This is the Gardening in Preschools portal. I know that Sharonda has given a shout out to this before, as has Caroline Hundley, but just another one. Lucy's always putting some good stuff out there. And then creating Child Care Center production gardens. This is on our NC State's Extension Publications website, and it was written by the Natural Learning Initiative staff, which I'm hoping that I'll have a little more information about some potential projects for home-based garden centers or home-based daycare centers and potential backyard gardens. But this is a really nice overview of thinking about your garden as a play space and as an exploration space, as well as a place to grow tasty veggies. And I include this slide last time, but I'm going to include it again. I know that I covered a lot of ground, no pun intended about going on about soil, but you can do it. Remember, these are recorded. If you forgot something, or if your brain just tuned out at a certain point and just stopped listening, you can go back and listen to it again. But the best thing is just go for it. These photos, and Estelle, you're out there, I know you are. I went to Estelle's place on Monday at 11 o'clock. And the picture on the top left was the picture I took of her seeds that she had started. She sent me the picture on the bottom just before this webinar happened. So in a little more than 2 days, look at the difference in the color and the size of those seedlings. And that's 72 plants that she can put in her gardens. Now, she does not have space for all of those. Most people don't have space for 75 plants. She's going to have to find some healthy homes for them, but just go for it. It's really possible, because plants don't read books. We write a lot of books about plants, but they don't read them. We do. And sometimes we psych ourselves out, but if we just went for it, some people might judge you, but we're all human and we're all just learning. There's 100 or more years of a lot of societal change and negative things that have happened. And there's a lot of knowledge lost, but a lot of knowledge can be gained right back if we just go for it and work together. And every task that you do, every mistake, celebration, achievement, success is an opportunity for your students to learn. So don't think of something as being, bad. Think of it like, hey, we tried this and it didn't work. We're going to try something else next time. So did I hear somebody talk? Sorry.
Hey, Amanda, it's Sharonda.
Yes.
Thank you for those inspirational words there. I just want to give you a time check. We only have 5 minutes left. So if you want to ask the audience for some questions, that would be wonderful. Yeah, but this was really good, really good. So, and everyone, I just have to say my hat's off to Amanda for all of the resources, especially the financial resources that she has given you here in this webinar today. So thank you as always. I'm sorry I can't show face today, but I am here. I've been here the whole time. And I just want to say thank you. But yes, I'll turn it right back over to you to ask some questions.
Oh, Caroline, I'm sorry. I'm looking back through the chat here. So does anybody have any questions? And you can unmute yourself and ask them. So I covered everything. Nobody has any questions. Everybody knows everything they need to know to go out and start gardening now.
I'm gonna tell you, I did have a question. So I can just take some dirt from my yard and walk to the and go to the extension office and ask them to test it for me.
Yep.
Okay.
There is a specific way that you need to take a soil sample. But if you contact your local cooperative extension office before you go, they can tell you how to do that. So you take the right sample, and when you bring it in the office, you can just send it right off. Every county is a little different. Some counties will mail the box for you. Some of them will drive it up to the state for you. The county extension office does not test the soil themselves. They send the soil to the state testing lab in Raleigh. But the testing results can be back within 1 to 2 weeks during the down season, which is April to November. And sometimes it can take as long as 4 weeks when it's really busy. The soil testing is free from April to Thanksgiving. And then you have to pay $4 a sample from Thanksgiving until May 31st. But that's just because there's so many farmers trying to send in their soil samples during the winter that they just try and encourage the general public to sample during the off season. Yep. But you're not alone. I know that I sound like a crazy, crazy person always going on about cooperative extension, but I have traveled around the world and I have lived in many states, and in North Carolina, we are so fortunate to have an organization like Cooperative Extension that exists in every county in the state. There are people there to serve you as citizens of North Carolina, to help you access information for free or for a very reduced cost, to help you reach your goals, whatever those are. I literally talk to people all day long about their random garden questions, and it is wonderful. So please reach out to your local people, because they do want to hear about what you've got going on, and they do want to help you. And that's all I got, everybody. I got one more next week. We're going to actually talk about the actual plants, which we haven't talked about yet. So that's my favorite part, except for the soil. I do like the soil, but
well, thank you so much, Amanda. I know there's a lot of enthusiasm in the chat and everybody's excited to get gardening. So
yes.
Thank you so much. The soil is their home, so we got to take care of it, right? So
that's right.
That's right. All right. Well, thank you so much, and we'll see you next week.
Have a great week, everybody.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.